Well, good morning and welcome. Here we are, the 19th of January, and I'm here to let you know that today is my birthday. Yes, I have turned 71 years of age, and I'll spare you all the cliches. I'm just surprised to still be here for a lot of different reasons, but nonetheless, I am thankful. But today we're also, more importantly, going to come into the final of the three sections of the Sermon on the Mount. Remember, part one with the Beatitudes was a new way of seeing, and then I said that results in a new way of thinking, where Jesus said, I know you've heard it said, but I say unto you. This idea of really taking the Mosaic law into a deeper level and clarifying it, how we can more effectively and meaningfully live out the Christian life within the constructs of God's morality and His truthfulness. But today we come to that last section, which is a new way of living. How do we put that into practice? And there's a term we use sometimes in kind of a theological sense. We talk about that orthodoxy should lead to orthopraxy. The word praxy, P-R-A-X-Y, means practice. In other words, if we really have right doctrine, it should translate into right living. And this is one of the things that is not only a challenge for every Christian. How do I live out my faith in a consistent and representative way so that people can really see the presence and the evidence of Christ in my life? But it's not only a challenge, but it's also really critically important, because oftentimes the accusation of hypocrisy fits. And it's devastating when we hear of somebody who, especially, and I know for me, men and women that I've had great respect for, and then suddenly you find out information that they were living a double life. That's tragic and it's destructive, and it really, in many ways, you begin to wonder, is anything they ever said to me reliable? And the only thing I can say is, well, all truth is God's truth, as the saying goes. In other words, if it's true, even if the messenger isn't true. And so that's why Jesus said, in fact, to the people of his day, he says, the Pharisees, the scribes and the lawyers, they occupy the seat of Moses, and so listen to what they say. In other words, they were teaching God's law. He says, so listen to what they say, but don't do as they do. And that's the sad and tragic commentary that we have in Scripture, that oftentimes we say things that we don't follow through consistently. That's true of us all, but where it's really painful is when there's a major contrast. And I strongly suspect, if you're taking the time to listen to these daily devotionals, that isn't where you live, that you're one of those people who is earnestly and anxiously and working really hard to live within the boundaries of God's will for your life. And so hopefully the things we talk about are helping you in that process. They're helpful for me, if no one else. So thank you for letting me do this. But I called this particular installment in these messages Gadflying, and the reason is because a gadfly it's an old-time term that means to flit around like a fly does when it's looking for something to eat, and it's basically flying around looking for something that will give it pleasure or praise. And we do that. We often do things not because we're thinking of anybody else but ourselves. In fact, when Jesus says here in verses 1 and 2 of chapter 6, he says, be careful not to do your acts of righteousness. We might call them acts of kindness or generosity. Do not do them before men to be seen by men, so that's not your motivation. If you do, you will have no reward of your Father in heaven. Why? You did it for yourself. He says, so when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets the way the Pharisees often did, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and on the streets, to be honored by men. I tell you the truth, they have received their reward in full. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret, and then your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you. Now, a couple of things you need to clarify here is that giving and generosity is something that's assumed by Jesus. He's not telling us to be generous. He's assuming that if you're a child of God and you're following Christ, that giving and generosity is going to just be an inherent part of your life. Also, he doesn't say that you have to always do it in the dead of night wearing a black hood and cape so that people don't know who did it. Now, granted, if that's your preference, I'm not going to criticize it. But the point is, he says it's not whether people know that you're the one who is a giver, but rather you're not doing it so people will know that you're a giver. Because a lot of giving is impossible to be anonymous, and in some circumstances, quite honestly, it's better not to be anonymous. It's better to let people know who is doing it, why they're doing it, and what's kind of the basis upon that giving. So I don't think we should interpret it as being this literal thing in the same way that we wouldn't say, if your eye offends you, pluck it out. This is the kind of thing that we don't do it to be seen or to get the praise or get the reward. We do it out of obedience. If somebody else finds out, that doesn't invalidate your reward as long as your heart is in the right place. But it also tells us, therefore, that how we give really matters to God. In fact, the how is probably, or the why and the how are probably more important to God than the what or how much. Because we place all this emphasis upon how much we give or how much we serve or sacrifice or how much kindness we show, when in fact God says, I'm more concerned with the motive of your heart, because if your heart is right, you're connected with me and you'll always do it appropriately and in the right measure. But the biggest thing we need to be careful of is that we don't do things for the applause of men. Rather, we do it for the approval of God. And that really leads to one of the great temptations at people, and that's misappropriating God's glory for themselves. But as I see my timer, I know I'm running out of time. So we'll continue this conversation tomorrow, and look forward to doing that just as we have today. Blessings, and may God pour out his great grace on your life.